6 months after our wedding, on a Thursday evening in October, I finally sat down to book the honeymoon we'd been putting off since June. I pulled up the account, looked at the balance, looked at it again. $14,000 was gone. 3 transfers over 2 months to an account I didn't recognize. I called Aaron into the kitchen. He looked at the screen, and the look on his face told me everything before he said a single word. My name is Priya. I'm 29, and the trail that $14,000 left behind led directly to my mother-in-law's phone contact list under a name I never should have had to know, Theo's People. I want to describe Aaron's family dynamic because it explains why Aaron did what he did with the login, and because understanding it made the couples counseling make sense. Aaron grew up in a family where his parents' comfort was a shared project, not explicitly, not announced, but present in the way of something operating in the background, shaping decisions. His mother communicated needs through implication, and his father managed conflict by smoothing it over before it could become visible. And Aaron had learned across 40 years of being their son to respond to the implication before it became explicit and to handle things quietly before they required a scene. That's not a criticism of his family. It's a description of a system that worked fine until it met a situation where the quiet handling involved someone else's money and someone else who hadn't been consulted. He gave her the login because she asked in a way that assumed yes, and because saying yes was the path that didn't require a conversation he didn't want to have. He didn't tell me because telling me would have required explaining a choice he already knew, somewhere, hadn't fully been his to make alone. He hoped the account would never actually be used. When I understood that pattern, really understood it, not just as an explanation for October, but as a description of how he'd been operating in his family for his entire life, the couples counseling stopped being about the money and started being about something more foundational, about what it means to be 2 people rather than 1 person and a person's son. Aaron and I got married 14 months before this happened. 230 guests, a backyard ceremony at his parents' house, which in hindsight is a detail worth noting. We received most of our wedding gifts in cash and check. South Asian weddings, a lot of envelopes, a lot of generosity. Combined total, just under $20,000. We put everything into a joint account opened specifically for 2 things, our honeymoon and a kitchen renovation we'd been putting off for 2 years. We deliberately postponed the honeymoon. Both of us were slammed with work in the months after the wedding, and we agreed to book properly in October when things slowed down. The account sat. We didn't check it much. Why would we? Nobody had access to it except us. Aaron's younger brother Theo was 24 at the time. Financial instability was the polite family phrase. What it meant in practice was ongoing debt, missed payments, a credit situation that his parents had been quietly managing for years through a combination of money and intervention. The family phrase for this was Theo finding his footing. He'd apparently been finding it for several years without any footing materializing. I knew about this in the vague way you know things about your husband's family that never directly touch your life, until October. I looked at the 3 transfers, August, September, September again, all to the same account number, a total of $14,108 gone in 3 movements. I called Aaron in. He looked at the screen. That look, I've described it to friends as the specific look of someone anticipating a fall they've seen coming from far away. Not surprise, not confusion, recognition. He said, "Mom." I said, "What did your mother do?" He told me. 3 months after the wedding, his mother had called him. Theo's debt was going to collections. She'd needed to move fast. She'd asked Aaron if the wedding account still had money in it. He'd said yes. She'd asked for the login. And Aaron had given it to her, without telling me. I want to sit with that for a moment because it matters. That account had both our names on it. The money in it came from 230 people who came to our wedding and gave it to both of us for our future together. Aaron gave someone access to that account in a phone call I wasn't part of, without mentioning it to me, because he thought it was unlikely to ever be used. He was wrong about the unlikely part. I called my mother-in-law directly. She didn't deny the transfers. She said Theo's situation was urgent. She said the account was just sitting there. She said family helps family. I said, "Did you think I'd never check?" She didn't answer that one. I want to tell you about the repayment conversation in a little more detail because my mother-in-law said something during it that I think matters. After I laid out the written plan requirement and the bank dispute alternative, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I thought you and Aaron were a family. I thought what affected one of us affected all of us." I said, "We are a family. That account belonged to me and Aaron, our family." She said, "Aaron is our family too." I said, "Then he should have been part of the conversation before you touched his account. He wasn't. Neither was I." What she was describing was a model of family where resources move toward need without going through the formal process of consent, where love is demonstrated by acting rather than asking. It's a model I understand. It's a model that in some families functions fine because everyone involved has the same implicit understanding of how resources flow, and no one objects. I was not part of that implicit understanding. I had not agreed to it. I had not been offered the chance to agree or disagree. And $14,000 had moved from an account with my name on it before anyone asked me anything. The written plan was submitted in 6 days. The repayment was completed in 5 weeks. The understanding of why it was necessary, that part took longer, and some of it is still being worked out. 2 weeks later, I was at Aaron's parents' house for a dinner that had been scheduled before any of this happened. I went because canceling would have required an explanation I wasn't ready to give in that room. His mother had left her phone on the kitchen counter. I wasn't looking for anything. It lit up with a notification when I was standing nearby. I saw the name on the screen, Theo's People. Follow up this week. I stood there for a moment. Theo's People. Not a creditor name, not a firm, Theo's People, in the specific, comfortable shorthand of someone who had saved a debt collector's contact information because they called often enough to need one. This changed the shape of what I understood had happened. My mother-in-law hadn't made a panicked decision in a moment of family crisis. She had been managing Theo's debt collectors directly, personally, regularly, for long enough that Theo's People was in her phone contacts. Our wedding gift money hadn't funded a single emergency. It had become one more resource in a management system she'd been running for years. She looked at an account belonging to 2 people and saw a solution to a problem she'd been managing alone. The fact that one of those people hadn't been told about the solution was not apparently the most important thing in that calculation. There's something I want to say about Aaron specifically because I think it gets lost in the larger story. He didn't steal from us. He made a bad decision under family pressure in a phone call he should have brought to me, and then he didn't tell me about it, and then the bad decision produced consequences he'd hoped to avoid. That's different from what his mother did. I've been careful to hold that distinction clearly because conflating them would be unfair to him and would also be inaccurate. What he needed to understand, what the couples counseling helped him understand over several months of actually working at it, was that the pattern behind that decision was the issue, not just the decision itself. The pattern of absorbing family pressure quietly, the pattern of handling things on behalf of us without consulting the other half of us, the pattern of managing his parents' comfort by making choices about our shared life. He understood it. That's the thing I want you to hear underneath the frustration in this story. He understood it, and then he worked on it, and that work is real and visible in how we operate now. He doesn't take calls from his family about our finances without telling me afterward. We've had explicit conversations about what joint means and what decisions belong to both of us versus what he can handle alone. That's not a small thing. It's the thing that makes the honeymoon and the locked account feel like an actual ending rather than just a pause. I told Aaron that evening what I'd seen. I didn't frame it as an accusation. I showed him the notification description from memory, told him what it meant about the pattern we were actually dealing with. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I should have told you. When she asked for the login, I should have called you first." I said, "Yes." He said, "I thought it was unlikely she'd actually use it." I said, "She used it 3 times." We agreed on 3 things. First, the money needed to be repaid in full with a concrete written plan and a timeline, not as things stabilize. Second, the access needed to change immediately. New login, no one else's credentials, period. Third, Aaron needed to be in the room when we had the repayment conversation with his mother, because this was his family and his marriage, and he didn't get to sit it out. His mother, when we sat down with her together, proposed repaying it gradually. I said that wasn't acceptable for money taken without consent. I told her I expected a written repayment plan within 1 week, with specific dates and amounts, or I would engage our bank's formal dispute process, because the transfers had been made by someone without the legal authority to make them from a joint account without both parties' consent. She said I was being cold. I said I'm being clear. The full $14,108 was repaid in 5 weeks, half from Aaron's parents, half from Theo, who turned out to be genuinely unaware of the specific source of his mother's intervention, and who, once he found out it had come from his brother's wedding gift account, sent his portion without being asked twice. Aaron and I changed every account credential that week, all of them, new passwords, 2-factor authentication, no third-party access to anything joint, a process that took most of a Saturday and that I found oddly satisfying, like installing a lock after a break-in and finally feeling the bolt click into place. The couples counseling we did afterward was not about the money. It was about something the money had revealed, that Aaron's default response to his family's needs was to accommodate first and inform me second, a pattern that had operated below the surface of our marriage until this made it visible. Naming it in a therapist's office was the beginning of actually addressing it. That work is real. That work is ongoing. It is, unexpectedly, one of the better things that came out of the worst thing. We booked the honeymoon in January, 6 weeks in Southeast Asia. We used the full balance of the repaid account, every dollar of what 230 people had given us for our beginning, finally doing what they'd given it for. I was in Vietnam when I got a text from my mother-in-law, a photo of something blooming in her garden, a friendly, ordinary message, the kind she'd sent before October. I read it. I sent back something brief and genuine. Aaron was on the balcony, watching the river. I put the phone down and went to stand with him. The new account has 2 names on it, 2 sets of credentials, 2 people who know the balance, and exactly 2 people in the world with any access to it. That's not a comment on my mother-in-law. It's just the world we live in now, one where we build the structure we need rather than assuming structure that isn't there. We assumed once. It cost us $14,000 and 5 weeks of repayment and a lot of difficult conversations. The bolt is locked now. That's how the story ends. A final thing, because I think it's the most important practical point in this story. Joint accounts require joint consent. This sounds obvious. It is apparently not obvious to everyone. A joint account does not mean one account holder can authorize third-party access without the other account holder's knowledge. It does not mean one account holder can give away the login credentials without the other party being informed. Both people's names on the account means both people's consent is required for access decisions. If you are currently in a marriage or partnership with a joint account that someone else has access to, someone your partner added without telling you, someone who has the login for emergencies, you have the right to know about that access and to remove it if you choose. This is not distrust, it is co-ownership. Aaron and I established a rule after all of this. Any third-party access to any shared account requires a conversation with both of us, in advance, explicit and documented. Not, I mentioned it, an actual conversation where both people respond. It is a rule that would have prevented October from happening. We built it in January, at a table in Vietnam, eating something I can't remember, because what I remember is the conversation and the fact that we were building something cleaner than what we'd had before. The account is locked. The honeymoon happened. We're building the structure we should have had from the beginning. That's how you end a story like this, not with everything repaired, but with something better than what broke. We built better. That choice, made deliberately, after everything it took to get there, is the part of this story I'm most sure of. Subscribe to Family Verdict for a new family betrayal story every week. If in-laws have ever touched money that wasn't theirs to touch, tell me your story in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.